Hello everybody, today we're going to take a look at what looks to be the first head-to-head poll for 2028 for president. That's going to be Kamala Harris and JD Vance. It's definitely way too early, I don't think this matters at all, but it's Christmas Eve. I'm sure a lot of people might have some more important things to do, but if you're here, we're going to take a look at their approval ratings and we're going to take a look at this poll. So let's get into it. This is from American Pulse Research and Polling. They're not one of the more high-profile pollsters, so as always with every poll, take it with a grain of salt, but let's see what we've got. Now, in addition to the head-to-head matchup, this poll also does have a bunch of other data here about the economy and the upcoming Trump administration, but a lot of that is stuff we've already taken a look at post-election. So the main thing we wanted to focus on in this video is going to be between Harris and Vance. Now real quick, one other thing we could throw in here is to see how accurate this pollster was in the recent election. So here on 538 in the head-to-head matchup, they've got Harris at 49 and Trump at 47. That was an 822 sample size. With third-party candidates, it's still a 2-point lead for Harris, 48 to 46. Now again, that's just with the national popular vote, but you can factor that into your overall perception of this pollster. Now back to the poll. Well, we want to get to Harris and we want to get to Vance. How would they do for 2028? Well, if we get all the way down here, we can see just under the podcasts and the drones section, that's where they squeeze in this 2028 hypothetical matchup. Again, remember, it's not the biggest sample size. It's under 700. But what does it say? It says Harris is at 47.2 and JD Vance is at 45.9, but it says Harris is a completely known quantity with an underwater favorability at a net minus 5.1 rating, and she narrowly leads the lesser known but more popular Vance by only 1.3. And then they even throw in their own personal commentary here. It says this means Harris would lose again, period, full stop. So let's talk about this for a minute. Harris's favorables were low before Biden dropped out. Then once he did, her favorables spiked. Now we'll look at her ratings in just a minute, but it's safe to say that after her loss, her ratings sank. Now JD Vance has never had really stellar approval ratings. He's faced a lot more media scrutiny and controversy with some of his comments. Seems like he did do better in that vice presidential debate, but he's still not at all viewed as popular. But of course, Harris is going to have a higher name ID. She was at the top of the ticket. But I'll be the first person to say that between now and 2028, absolutely anything could happen. If it actually was Harris and Vance, here's what could conceivably happen that would be favorable for Harris. Maybe she becomes governor of California. Maybe the stain of the presidential defeat wears off quickly and she has a lot of success in that position. Meanwhile, maybe Trump or Vance runs into some sort of a heavy controversy. Maybe there's a blowout loss in the midterms. Maybe the Democrats are still scrambling to figure out which way to go after their 2024 defeat. And maybe a storyline starts to brew where Harris did get defeated by Trump. She looked like she was finished from politics, but everybody somehow coalesces around her. They don't really want to do anything different. She runs, she does well in a primary, and she runs up against Vance, who clears his primary field, but his popularity is just not there. And if the economy is not great and the national environment favors the Dems, then of course Harris could win it. She doesn't even have to be governor of California. She could give paid speeches, she could write a couple of books, she could make the media rounds. There are a lot of people in that establishment class that do like her, not as many as there was a couple of months ago, but she could get it together and win it. I don't think that's totally impossible. Now, I thought she was weak before the election. I do think after this defeat, it's very unlikely that somebody else would not be able to at least get into this race and be stronger than Harris. But that is the more favorable case for Harris. I think it's far more likely that even if Vance or Trump has low favorability ratings, there's going to be at least 2 or 3 other higher profile Democrats that get into the 28 race. If they do along with Harris, I would think Harris would be more likely than not to not be able to win that primary. But for right now, she's more or less kind of the leader of the party. That's at least until somebody else can rise up and take the reins from her. Because Biden's going to be out soon, she's going to be out with him. It's an open field, and eventually Democrats are going to move past this defeat of Harris in 24, and they're going to start to get that itch of who's actually going to try to take down the next Republican in 28 and be the hero. Now on the other side, JD Vance does have a unique opportunity here. His favorables were not really all that great, that's true, but if somehow Trump has a moderately successful presidency and Vance doesn't completely step in it too much, given his age and the continuation of the Trump brand, he's likely to be in the conversation of a strong contender for the next election. So this poll, of course, is way too early. It doesn't mean anything. Harris is still in the limelight right now, but she could easily fizzle out over the next few months to the next year. But let's actually look at Harris's favorability ratings, and for that we can get on to 538. So here it is. As of December 21st, it's 5.1% underwater. That's about 44 favorable, 49 unfavorable. Now if you go back to the beginning when Biden just got into office, she was above water. She was actually in the high 40s, but as Biden's rating dropped off, so did Harris's. And it pretty much stayed there for a very long time where it seemed like it was going to be very difficult to imagine it being positive ever again. So when Biden dropped dropped out, you could see here that her favorabilities did spike. It was in a very short period of time. It was about just a week or two. And then she managed to top off where she actually did have a net favorability rating again. But given that amount of movement in such a short time, it did to me seem like it was kind of artificial. After her loss here in early November, then her favorabilities are back underwater. And they're really headed in the wrong direction. That's a terrible trend there for Harris. Now, to be fair, I would expect that if Trump took the loss in that election, his favorability rating would also have taken a hit. At that point, there's going to be a segment of Republicans that would say they're totally done with Trump. He's not at all going to be the future of the party. And that's what I think some Democrats are saying about Harris at this point, but there's still clearly a divide. A lot of people have said this, and I agree that Democrats should have had an actual primary. That would be assuming Biden never declared he's going to run for a second term. If that happened, I would guess Harris would not have been able to defeat a bunch of other Democrats. So she did have a couple of months where it looked like she was doing really well. She was close to becoming the next president, but it was all short-lived and I think short-sighted. And now who knows what she's going to do next. Maybe she does run for California governor. Maybe she calls it quits, but she could also say, hey, Donald Trump took a loss for president and he came right back and won the next time. That's true. The only difference with that is Trump actually already won before he lost. Harris is kind of 0 for 1 in that department. But anyway, let's finish it up here on JD Vance's favorables. And with Vance, it's a different story. A lot of people have no opinion of him. They just don't know who he is. I'm sure a good chunk of people, even in Ohio, aren't really that familiar with him, even though he's the senator from that state. He only really got into office at the beginning of 2023, but he's underwater by 3.9. That's kind of weak, but it's not too terrible. But as you can see, as more people got to know Vance, again, he did have a lot of unfavorable media coverage. You could be the judge of it if it was mostly fair or mostly unfair or some kind of a mix, but his favorable and his unfavorable rating rose up, but the unfavorable was always clearly ahead. Even after his debate performance, the gap did not close significantly, and after he and Trump won the election, not a whole lot here has changed either. Actually, his unfavorability rating, it's only come down slightly to about 4%. So Vance is a very unknown quantity. A lot of the headlines in the news now are about Elon Musk or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or some other cabinet pick. I think once Trump is actually in there, Vance should become more prominent, but he's also just going to be the VP. It's kind of a more in the background type of position. So maybe there's something unique about Vance and he reinvents the position of vice president, or maybe he's completely inconsequential and he stumbles through it and he just has no future in politics. He does have some room to expand. He's got some room to fall. We're going to see what happens, but if he took on Harris in 2028, it's almost impossible to guess how it would go. So you could come up with some wild scenarios if you'd like, and that's going to be what the comments are for. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this matchup between Harris and Vance for 28? It's obviously way too early, but what do you think would happen if the election were today or in 4 years? What are the big things that could happen? Do you think Harris is even going to run again? What do you think the outlook for Vance is as VP? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.